While American Sonic fans were reading the Archie comic books, us British fans enjoyed the entirely different Sonic the comic. They had Tommy the Turtle, we had Short Fuse the Cybernik. They had a Robotnik inspired by Sat AM, we had one styled after Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog. They had Ken Penders, a man who sued Sega over the rights to characters he created for the book, while we had Nigel Kitching, a considerably more humble and down-to-earth man who recently went on stage at Western Supersonic to talk about how some of his greatest creations were inspired by characters and arcs from popular TV shows. The series followed the format of other British comics such as 2000 AD. You had 3 to 4 short stories that were between 4 and 7 pages long each. The main story usually focused on Sonic, while the backup stories followed other cast members, like Knuckles and Tails, in their own solo adventures. In this continuity, Robotnik was a dictator ruling over Mobius, while Sonic led an underground group of freedom fighters which resisted his rule. Or at least that's what the comic would eventually become. In truth, a lot of those elements don't come into play until after the events of issues 8 and 9, where Robotnik successfully takes over the planet. Before that, Sonic the Comic featured a series of seemingly disconnected one-shots, lacking much of its own identity or continuity. Even its own creative team admits that they found themselves running out of ideas and wondering how sustainable the comic would be before they shook up the status quo and created their own lore. It was even a stretch to call it Sonic the Comic. In truth, it was more Sega the Comic, with the backup stories being based on games like Streets of Rage, Shinobi, and Marco's Magic Football. We all remember that one, right? For this reason, when we look back at Sonic the Comic, it can be tempting to skip straight to issue 8, ignoring everything that came before. However, the comic does manage to set up some interesting things, some of which are dropped in those formative issues, and there's certainly some merit in revisiting them. In this video, we're going to look at what we got in the first few issues of Sonic the Comic, how issues 8 and 9 changed everything, and whether those changes managed to ripple through the rest of the run overnight, or if it was instead a much slower burn. If, for some reason, you want to skip straight to issue 8 anyway, I'll pop a timecode on screen for you now. Otherwise, let's start with issue 1, Enter Sonic. Our debut issue is written by Alan McKenzie with art by Anthony Williams and letters from Tom Frame. To set the context for what material the team had to work with, this released on the 29th of May 1993. Sonic 2 had been out for around 6 months, Sonic CD was due to release later that year, and I had turned 4 years old just a few days beforehand. The basic plot is that Robotnik has created a machine that runs on ring energy and Sonic's out to destroy it. It's really straightforward stuff, but I'm more interested in how this particular story is told. The opening page is laid out well. In a traditional piece of art, the aim is to create circles, figure eights, and other shapes that lack a defined start and end point. You want the viewer to be absorbed in the work without a point of escape. You want to keep their gaze. Comics are much more mechanical and transactional. You're aiming to get the reader's eye from the top left-hand corner to the bottom right, and then onto the next page. Here, the title and captions start us on the left, Sonic's afterimages lead us to the right, into Cucky being freed from a motor bug and his accompanying speech balloon, with the afterimages and main picture of Sonic pulling us back left and down to panel 2. This trend is continued with Sonic running and pointing to the right, leading us into the third and final panel, where we would slide across Robotnik's mustache, down his arm, through his text and into the corner for the next page, if he wasn't pointing back up to panel 1. Seriously, every time I read this page, my eye goes back up to the spadoing sound effect instead of continuing to follow the narrative. Now that we've seen an example of getting it mostly right, let's see a much messier example of this same principle. On page 4, Sonic falls off a cliff while being shot at by buzz bombers, tucks into a roll, and then flings himself back up at his assailants. In doing so, a fairly nice curve is made for the reader's eye to follow as Sonic moves right across the page, until the illusion is broken by the camera placement. The camera seems to always be to Sonic's right. It's implied he turns in this panel as the rocks bleed in from the previous one, but as we don't see him land, it's unclear as to whether he's rolling back up the same hill he just fell from, or an adjacent hill. His attackers were clearly situated behind him, so have the buzz bombers moved, or did Sonic do a 180 somewhere? When Sonic reaches the top, we can't see any cliff sides opposite him, so we have to assume he's climbed the same hill he fell down. But then the camera placement makes no sense. Then again, if I flip this panel to make the camera contextually relevant, I break this nice arc that the artist made, and the reader doesn't get a smooth experience. It's a catch-22. Yes, this is the content you subscribed for. I don't know why either. Respecting that Anthony has done paid work for licensed comics and I haven't, this panel at the bottom of page 3 lets us make a direct comparison to the UK's box art for Sonic 1, and sadly, that comparison is not favourable. This shot also reminded me of some official Sonic artwork, but I couldn't place it until I saw the advert for the free badge that would come with issue 2. Oh hey, this page has a very Shonen Jump feeling reader survey. How have I never noticed these before? The line work suggests that the penciling stage was either minimal or skipped entirely, possibly due to deadlines, as we see an overall lack of definition or consistency in the shapes of characters. The similarities between these two poses and the over-reliance of three-quarter shots says this work may have been rushed. Okay, so not the greatest first impression on the art front. How did the writing do? Two tropes are established in this issue that, thankfully, didn't stick around for very long. The first is Robotnik's tendency to constantly make egg puns. How exasperating! Couldn't have said it better myself, Doc. The other is a lack of punctuation in Sonic's speech. I get that he's got to go fast. He possibly talks fast too, and this might be a character trait that was stolen from The Flash, but even as an adult, it's hard to read. It's like looking at code from a coworker who doesn't respect camel case, and it gives me a headache. This issue also breaks the rule of show, don't tell. This is a comic. It's a visual medium. Trust your artist. We don't need you to tell us what we can plainly see. This panel is a prime example of that. Badnik Attack is redundant, as is Sonic's explanation that his friends are the living batteries for these machines. Not only did we see that for ourselves in the first panel of the first page, we also see that in the very next panel that follows this speech. I know this is a kid's comic, so I ran this past my own children and they felt it talked down to them. The story centers around this machine. Supposedly it will never need refueling because it runs on ring energy. So is that to say that there's an infinite supply of rings in this world? It shows us the restrictions of the low page count too, as we spend 6 pages building up to a showdown between Sonic and this machine, only for Sonic to destroy it in a single hit, resulting in an anticlimax. This is a problem that would persist for a while in the early days of the comic, impacting multiple stories. There are some surprises to be found here. This issue introduces Porker Lewis, although not as we would later come to know him. Here he's just a character plucked straight from the game's manual rather than a fully fledged member of Sonic's Freedom Fighters. It's more evidence towards that concept simply not being on the table yet. Second was the destruction of my long-held belief that these issues were a series of disconnected one-shots. We actually get a lead-in for issue 2. Sonic says he hasn't seen Tails for days and is worried about him before running off to find the two-tailed fox. The backup stories feature different Sega properties by different writers, artists and letterers, so are outside the scope of this video, and you can safely assume that to be the case for the rest of this video. I'm concentrating solely on the Sonic content here. Who knows, maybe we'll come back around to look at these separately one day. So, based solely on the Sonic content of this issue, I think this is a mid-tier, passable, licensed children's comic that's gently dipping its toes into the water, most likely on a smaller budget. It's fine for what it is, but what it is disposable. Let's see if that second issue would help the comic transform into the icon it eventually became. The opening of issue 2 is confusing. It only kind of follows on from issue 1's lead-in, having multiple direct contradictions to it. This may be the editor's fault as we have a different creative team. Our artist is Woodrow Phoenix, lettering is handled by John Aldrich, and it's written by Mark Miller. Yes, that Mark Miller. Kick-Ass, Jupiter's Legacy, and Super Crooks Mark Miller. You'd be surprised how many high-profile writers used to work on British comics. Anyway, my guess is that multiple issues of the comic were being worked on at the same time, and that Mark never saw Alan's final script for issue 1, possibly only getting a rough outline at most. Sonic says he's just come back from the Marble Zone, when we know he was in Green Hill, and seems surprised that Tails is missing, despite saying he was looking for and worried about his friend at the end of issue 1. I'm going to chalk this up to a lack of communication between teams, which the editor is ultimately responsible for. We have an A and B plot here. The A is the search for Tails, while B sees Sonic simultaneously stress testing some new trainers. That's what British people call sneakers. Sonic's also wearing sunglasses throughout most of the issue. I have no idea why, and it's incredibly distracting. His ears are on top of his head. How are these things staying on his face? No! They don't serve any story purpose, and I don't think they ever return. Speaking of new looks, it's not long before Sonic finds Tails and, On the one hand, this is Tails' first appearance. This is a kid's comic. They wanted the audience to know that this was him. On the other hand, it looks like Robotnik half-assed this one, not even finishing the job. Design-wise, it has a lot of issues. What's with this vent over his ear? How come the tails and arms are articulated, but the legs and feet are one solid, immovable piece? Wouldn't that effectively immobilize Tails? Especially when this is designed to go up against the fastest thing alive. We do get a motivation for Tails beyond the simple Robotnik has turned me into a badnik. Essentially your typical resentment, you treat me like a kid, I live in your shadow stuff, but squeezed into a single outburst in one panel because the story is running out of pages again. On literally the next page, Tails comes to his senses and defeats Robotnik. That's not the only issue with the writing. Apparently, badniks can talk, but they don't say anything of value. Freed critters talk about being cute and cuddly again. Yeah, thanks, we can see that. Sonic goes from being surprised that Tails is missing to magically knowing where to find him. Everyone announces their attacks. Robotnik tells us Tails is a badnik after we've seen the fox in the suit. Tails has attacked Sonic and blurted out a personal motivation for doing so. No shit, he's a badnik? I would not have gotten that if you hadn't said so. Being a British comic, there are some UKisms in the dialogue too. Mum is spelled correctly, thank you. Sonic sorts things out, Robotnik reckons the upcoming fight will be a laugh, and after his defeat, Eggbreath is off to watch an episode of El Dorado. Huh, a British soap opera that ran from 1992 to 1993. That reference has aged. I'm not sure kids would have known it back then either. I wonder if this is how the pop culture references in the Sonic movies will land 20 years from now. The artwork here is slightly better than in the previous issue, although the panel layouts are somewhat simple, repetitive, and boring. 3 of the 7 pages use a 4-panel square grid with a 5th landscape panel. It makes for quite a flat, mechanical, yet easy read. It's overall unremarkable and not representative of what we had to come later on. Oh, I almost forgot about the B plot. Probably because the subplot has a start, Sonic putting on the shoes, and an end, Sonic saying the new shoes couldn't keep up with him, but no middle. They don't impact his performance in his fight with Tails at all. Their inclusion seems entirely pointless except for one line. Good job, I don't need special shoes. The power in me is awesome enough as it is. This confirms that, in this continuity, Sonic's power is his own. It doesn't come from any speed shoes. Sorry, Sonic Labyrinth. That said, issue 3 doesn't entirely line up with this. As soon as this issue starts, we're hit by the massive improvement in artwork. This is Jose Casanovas, whose high level of detail, especially in the backgrounds, vivid colours, and strong shading with confident use of white highlights significantly raises the bar for everyone who would follow. His art has a high fantasy medieval tabletop role-playing game feel to it, suiting our woodland creatures incredibly well. We're also introduced to Aletta Fell as our letterer. Aletta would stay with the comic for a very long time. In fact, that's the first name I associate with Sonic the Comic's lettering. Mark Millar returns as our writer, and in my opinion, this issue is a huge improvement over his previous story. Tufty the Squirrel has found an old pair of Sonic shoes and, wanting to be a hero, has ventured to the Marble Zone to save his friends. It's not going well for him. Meanwhile, his sister Sally Acorn, yes, Sally Acorn, again seemingly based on her game manual artwork rather than SatAM, raises the alarm, causing Sonic to leap into action. From there, it's a fairly straightforward rescue mission. What's interesting is the idea that Sonic's speed shoes might hold residual power from the Hedgehog. Technically, I don't think this contradicts anything we'll learn later on. Sonic's power is still his own. The shoes have just somehow held on to some of that energy, but we'll get to the Blue Boy's origins soon enough. Sonic does say, "Don't mess with things that only work for me," even though we see Tufty seemingly use super speed a couple of times, but maybe I shouldn't take that line at face value. Speaking of lines, the Badniks are talking, coordinating, and a bit twisted. One even considers offing itself instead of giving Sonic the pleasure. Makes you think about Badniks we defeat over lava or in the sky in the games, eh? Granted, we saw Badniks talk in issue 2, but this issue implies much more intelligence. Given that they have organic batteries, is this conversation coming from an onboard AI, or have Sonic's friends been brainwashed? We actually kind of get an answer to that, but we're getting way ahead of ourselves. The Badniks also seem indecisive, going from wanting to crush Tufty with a wrecking ball to wanting to throw him into a Badnik generator. The only purpose this seems to serve is allowing time for Sonic to spend a page and a half of a 7-page story racing towards Tufty. Is this meant to build tension? Because it doesn't. Anyway, all's well that ends well, we get a significant step up in art, some more personality for the Badniks, and we learn a little bit more about Sonic's powers and shoes. All in all, a decent issue, easily the best one so far. Time for another new issue and another new creative team. Well, Alita returns on lettering, but the artist this time is Ed Hillier, and the writer is the man, the myth, the legend, one of Sonic the Comic's most prolific and fan-favourite writers, the one, the only, the inimitable Nigel Kitching. And oh boy, let me tell you, this issue is a mixed bag all around. Let's start with the artwork. Ed has some very cute and expressive moments, especially when drawing Tails. This little detail of Tails sticking his tongue out at Sonic really goes to show the boy's age, but also the brotherly, hey, we can pick on each other bond that Sonic and Tails have in this comic. Well, when you're not cherry-picking 4 out-of-context panels from the entire run for a popular tweet, anyway. Hillier's art can be cute and whimsical, with a bouncy cartoon energy that's a nice fit for a kid's comic, but it also forgets to be a comic. This panel is a good example. It's in the bottom corner, final panel of the page. It should be leading me out of the page so I can turn to the next one. And yeah, your eye tracks from the Badnik in the top corner, through the speech balloon to Sonic, and bam, there's the corner. Except for the fact that this panel also features Tails running up a pillar with a dust cloud just above Sonic. Now, our eyes reach Sonic, follow Tails' upward motion, and gets back to the Badnik, creating a loop. As a result, we don't have a clear exit point for this panel. Page 1 is possibly the worst offender. First, it breaks the left to right rule. The first character speaking is on the right, restricting where Alita can place the lettering and balloons. This starts our eyes moving in the wrong direction from the get-go. We then break the top to bottom rule by going diagonally up the page, seemingly to make room for this shot of a Sonic Badnik, which the critters we've been following react to by running away to the left, leading us back to panel 1, creating the dreaded loop.
Oh, Webster, this stuff is so boring. Who cares about page flow, or panel layouts, or scripts, or drawings, or comic books, or Sonic the Hedgehog, or anything? Who cares about anything?
Here's the thing. Good panel placement leading to a better reader experience is a subtle art that plays on your subconscious. You're not supposed to notice it. That's the magic. A bad page layout, on the other hand, sticks out like a sore thumb and pulls you straight back out of the experience. It's like audio mixing in a movie. When it's done right, you don't notice it. When it's done badly, you're turning the volume up to hear what the characters are saying and then turning it down when the music or sound effects blast your eardrums off. As a litmus test, I asked my wife, who has no interest in Sonic or comics, what she thought. She found this page jarring and uncomfortable to read, although she couldn't explain why. To illustrate the point, I edited the page, keeping as much of the original artwork intact as possible. Ruff, as the first character to speak, is now on the left. We followed a slant downwards, leading into the final panel, which now runs left to right, taking us out of the page. It's much easier to read. Here are the two pages side by side, the original on the left and my edit on the right. When I showed my wife the edit, she felt the new version was, quote, much better. But again, she couldn't explain why, as she's not an artist or designer. I'm not sure if Ed is unfamiliar with the Sonic franchise or whether Nigel gave him specific instructions or designs to use, but while previous issues used in-game Badniks, this issue presents these guys. I could see the Cerberus maybe working, but what's with this walking purple cage? How does it not fall over? What's the point of the stumpy T-Rex arms? How is this thing combat ready? Weirdly, we do then get giant versions of the game Badniks a couple of pages later, so why the custom designs? Likewise, what is Robotnik wearing? A magician's top hat and a metal boiler suit? And the cape. Oh my days, the cape. We need this costume in-game. Sonic hacking contest, make it happen. Let's look at Nigel's writing. Rough and Stripe's first page introduces the plot. There's a Badnik that looks like Sonic, and it's destroying star posts. Fine. Functional. I have no issues with that. We then get an entire page dedicated to these two becoming Badniks, which has no payoff or impact on the overall story. They're just coincidentally freed at the end after not contributing to the main battle. Seriously, they're just hanging about in the background. It's odd to see a writer of Nigel's ability ignoring Chekhov's gun, especially when you've only got 7 pages. Their capture seems wasteful, which stings all the more as the resolution is again rushed here. It turns out the Sonic Badnik is designed to capture Sonic and use him as its organic battery. Even though the Badnik is fully operational and going toe-to-toe with Sonic without having the Hedgehog installed yet, so why does he need him? Tails initially shows bravery, take that forces, but his involvement gets Sonic captured. Tails now has to face down a robotic version of his friend and mentor. Robotnik even brought along a new version of the Tails shell from issue 2 so he can add the Fox back into his army. That could be interesting if we weren't on page 6 of 7. It turns out Sonic's just too cool and strong-willed for Robotnik to control, meaning he's in full control of the Badnik suit, forcing Robotnik to abort the operation. It honestly feels like something of a Deus Ex Machina. As for why the Badnik was tearing up star posts in the first place, there's Sonic's gateway into and out of the Special Zone, even though he used a giant ring to get to the Special Zone last issue. Robotnik claims to have set up a new base there, and he doesn't want Sonic to be able to interfere. Does this set up a future issue? Well, kind of. I'll be honest, it's not a great first outing for my favourite writer on the comics staff. Thankfully, Kitching would go on to deliver much better stories and characters in the near future. Sadly, before we get there, we have one of the weakest issues yet. Miller and Woodrow are back with Josh Aldrich lettering. Okay, so what have we got here? Things start out with Badnik's kidnapping Tails because this is the 3rd time in just 5 issues that Robotnik's trying to turn the little guy into his servant. The dude's obsessed! And while that is a repeated plot point, this issue does deliver the first time other characters follow Sonic into battle. He's accompanied by Sally Acorn, Johnny Lightfoot, and hey, do we ever actually get a name for the bovine? Sadly, they contribute absolutely nothing to the rescue effort. They're just sort of there. What's strange is that these enemies are led by a Prime Badnik, a mech that doesn't need an organic battery, and we would see this concept return in a big way throughout the series. What I don't get is that they seemingly can't roboticize Tails there and then. We know portable conversion machines exist, we've seen them, and if they couldn't do it on the spot, why bring the Badnik shell with them? For some reason they use the issue 2 Tails suit despite seeing a new and upgraded design last issue. I'm going to chalk that up to poor communication, creating issues in parallel, or editorial problems again. What I can't displace the blame for is the almost complete absence of backgrounds, often just getting a single flat colour. I'm sorry, this just feels low effort. I know I started this video by saying these issues weren't as skippable as I initially thought, but you are only missing the concept of a Prime Badnik if you skim over this one. Thankfully, it's immediately followed by one of the best issues of this early run. Our 6th outing sees the return of Nigel Kitching and Aletta Fell, this time with art by Ferran Rodriguez, a fantastic artist that we would see more of as the comic continued. This is the first time we're seeing Sonic operating out of a base, specifically the laboratory of Dr. Kintobor, the first time we're even hearing that name or seeing his holographic image. Although this face would receive a redesign very soon. I honestly thought we didn't see either of these elements until after the Freedom Fighters had been formed, but here they are. We'll learn more about who Dr. Kintobor was and his role in the lore in that all-important issue 8. It turns out that the Death Egg wasn't destroyed at the end of Sonic 2 and is currently falling towards Mobius, where it will crash land into the Emerald Hill Zone. We actually get multiple confirmations in this issue that Sonic 2 has indeed already taken place. We would later get short adaptations of Sonic 1 and 2 presented as flashbacks in the backup stories of issues 26 and 27. The events of the issue itself are otherwise pretty unremarkable, largely being a retread of Sonic 2's Wing Fortress and Death Egg zones before Sonic manages to alter the Death Egg's course and crash it into the sea. This issue does develop Sonic and Tails' relationship. Tails isn't a whiz kid or genius yet. For example, he can't figure out why Sonic is going to Wing Fortress instead of flying directly to the Death Egg. It's Sonic who has to say that they can't get into space in a biplane. Sonic does seem dismissive of Tails, but in a protective sense. He doesn't want to endanger the kid. We see first-hand proof that he cares about how Tails thinks of him. When it's clear that the Death Egg needs to be steered manually, Sonic prioritizes Tails' life, telling him to use the escape pod. Again, the two have friendly banter and clearly care about each other in this comic, regardless of what Twitter would have you believe. Farron's art is a real treat. It reminds me a lot of early Japanese artwork. The third spike sits lower on Sonic's head, connecting his neck and shoulder blades, causing some shots to only show 2 spikes on his head. I think this style and depiction of Sonic often gets forgotten about, with an absolute rule that all 3 spikes are on Sonic's head at all times, and I kind of miss this older approach sometimes. There's one very obvious mistake with, yes you guessed it, panel layouts! Typically, when we have 2 panels stacked vertically next to a larger panel, the reading order is top, bottom, right. Here it's top, right, bottom. I read it out of order every time, wondering how they got from the ship to the docking platform back to the ship. My other question is what this will mean for the comic's adaptation of Sonic 3 and Knuckles. If the Death Egg has crash-landed into the sea, how is it supposed to crash onto the floating island, causing Robotnik to meet Knuckles while Sonic and Tails follow its signal? Well, you'll just have to wait and see on that front. Overall though, this is a strong adventure that alludes to the world Kitching would eventually craft for this continuity to thrive in. A universe we've almost reached the birth of. Before we see Sonic's origin story, there's one last pit stop that sets up some important lore, Issue 7's Super Sonic. Kitching and Fell are back, this time joined by artist Richard Elson. Now, Elson is not just my favourite artist on this comic, he's not just one of my favourite comic artists overall, he's one of my favourite artists period. He's one of my earliest influences and a massive part of the reason I ever picked up a pencil or drew comics myself. Without Richard Elson's artwork in Sonic the Comic, I might not have a career as a senior designer right now. Moreover, I've been lucky enough to meet both Elson and Kitching. They're both lovely, friendly, down-to-earth people. Whoever said don't meet your heroes clearly didn't have these two as their heroes. They're fantastic, and I can't thank them enough. Getting to not only see some of the original pages in person, but also talk shop with Elson about his process, his materials, and how his style changed and evolved over time was amazing. I cannot be objective here, I'm not even going to try. I'm going to unapologetically rave about Elson's artwork and Kitching's writing. The bold lines, the striking colours, the banter between characters, it's all gold in my eyes. Which is fitting, because this is where we meet Super Sonic. Yeah, I'm still capable of a segue, deal with it. Now, I've done videos chronicling Super Sonic before, but the TLDR is that the comics version of Super Sonic is based on how difficult Super is to control in-game due to his speed and acceleration. It combines that with a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, with a dash of the Incredible Hulk, to give us a super form that's all-powerful, but also absolutely manic, a chaotic force of nature. Interestingly, the transformation doesn't come about as a result of the Chaos Emeralds on this occasion. We would later get clarification that the Emeralds triggered Sonic's first ever transformation, and that Super manifests when Sonic is highly stressed. Here though, Tails says he's seen it once before, when Sonic grabbed too many rings, likely alluding to the game's 50 ring requirement. Sonic backs this up, saying he thinks it's due to the ring energy he's absorbed over the years. Reading this back, it's odd seeing Elson's early rendition of Sonic. I'm used to his somewhat chubbier version. This is a skinnier Sonic that features the American Mohawk hair. Like Rodriguez, Elson clearly references early model sheets where Sonic has 2 spikes on his head, and a third that runs from his neck to his torso. This design actually stuck around longer than I remembered. It's the one we'll see for the remainder of this video, and it'll be interesting to highlight when that changes in future installments. He also uses the wheel feet, which appear in artwork for Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog and the Game Gear games, that I've always been a big fan of. There are also some flourishes and attention to detail pieces that I adore here, especially the use of light. Seeing the yellow reflections in the oil just before it lights, how Tails and Red have their faces illuminated by the glow of the flames, the little sparks of electricity around Super himself. I also believe we're looking at mixed media here, with alcohol-based markers such as Copics or Pro markers for the characters, and what I assume to be watercolours for the backgrounds. It brings about a difference in saturation values, allowing the focal points that are Sonic and Pals to be more vibrant and pop, drawing the eye's attention without making the environment seem dull by contrast. Everything feels cohesive. We can identify which materials things are made from, look at how shiny this floor is, there's a great sense of space, we know where everyone and everything is situated, and I'm gushing, aren't I? Should we just move on to the main event? The reason most of you clicked this thumbnail, issue 8 itself? Yeah, let's do that. Okay, the main event, the revelation of Sonic's origins. It begins with Sonic taking Johnny Lightfoot and Porker Lewis into the Special Zone with him. This is the second time they've said only Sonic can get there by using the star posts. I guess they really are retconning that whole accessing the Special Zone via giant rings from issue 3, huh? While in the Special Zone, Sonic confirms that he's already collected the Chaos Emeralds and is keeping them in a safe place. This won't come up again for another 10 issues or so, but it's nice to have confirmation regardless. Sonic introduces the gang to his friend, the Omni Viewer, and asks him to show the truth about Dr. Robotnik. I love how we're already nailing Sonic's character here, including all that crazy stuff about how you got your powers. Naturally, that's the best part. Smarmy, cocky, but charismatic all the same. So, a few things to cover here. Yes, Sonic was a regular brown hedgehog back then. Dr. Ivo Robotnik was called Dr. Ovi Kintobor at the time. He had 6 of the Chaos Emeralds, using them to contain the planet's evil. However you manage to quantify, capture, and contain the concept of evil. But the machine is unstable without the 7th Chaos Emerald. This note about the 7th Emerald will be important for a much later arc, but for now just keep it in your back pocket. Sonic is already fast, and Kintobor wants to run some experiments to see if he can help the hedgehog go even faster. In exchange, Sonic agrees to hunt for the missing Chaos Emerald. As part of those experiments, Kintobor gifts Sonic his iconic shoes. This helps Sonic break the sound barrier, with the resulting sonic boom transforming the Hedgehog forever. No, not like that sonic boom. That was a different transformation. One day during lunch, there's an accident, yes, I'm using air quotes there, another story for another time, causes Kintobor to trip and fall into the machine housing the Chaos Emeralds while holding a rotten egg. As the smoke clears, we see Kintobor emerge from the wreckage, now transformed into the evil Dr. Robotnik. As the Omniviewer brings the story to a close, he warns Sonic to get away, but it's too late. The Omniviewer traps Sonic and his friends at the command of Robotnik, ending things on a cliffhanger. I love this issue. I even got mine signed by Olsen and Kitching at one of the Western Super Sonic events. Can we take a moment to appreciate some of the art here? The Special Zone looks like a series of chaotic album covers. It nails the otherworldly vibe of the stage. This page in particular is superbly done. The restricted colour palette, consisting mainly of purples, really sells the mood and atmosphere. It's creepy, and that first look at Robotnik is terrifying. He's towering over Sonic, taking up so much of the page as this imposing threat. It's great. There's even a nice small touch in that the flashback panels are curved to make it easier for the reader, while also reflecting the shape of the Omniviewer itself. Really great work all around. Yes, this is largely based on an old Sonic lore bible, and yeah, that does mean we've seen other versions of this story in other comics and novels, but this is the version most people tend to think of. Sonic the Comic made this backstory its own. The comic would revisit these events a couple of times, and we do get a retcon down the road, but even going in with that knowledge, everything still fits. We'll no doubt cover those in a future video. Writing-wise, Robotnik told us he was based in the Special Zone back in issue 4. I'd have liked for that to have played into Sonic's motives. Have him go to the Special Zone to take the fight to Robotnik and then get trapped. They would have made it seem like Robotnik planned it, letting that detail slip on purpose. As it stands, it's just a happy accident that Sonic just so happened to feel like showing Johnny and Porker his and Robotnik's origins. Egg Breath got lucky instead of calculating it, and that doesn't feel right to me. For now, let's not leave you in suspense. What did the Omniviewer do with Sonic and his pals? The Omniviewer spits Sonic and the gang back out in the Emerald Hill Zone. Sonic wonders how the Omniviewer was able to disobey Robotnik, and soon learns that Robotnik simply phrased his command poorly. He wanted Sonic gone, so Omni transported the team 6 months into the future. We immediately get into a battle with stronger badniks and soon learn that Robotnik has used the past 6 months to take over Mobius. We get to see the Mad Dictator's regime firsthand as an Emerald Hill resident is sentenced to death in the streets for missing a day of work to care for his sick wife. I love this dialogue exchange. The penalty for non-compliance with the work enterprise scheme is death. The penalty for doing anything around here is death. Dr. Robotnik is harsh but fair. Brilliant. Sonic intervenes, but initially holds back so he doesn't hurt the animals trapped inside. This is a nice little character detail. It shows that, beneath the bravado, Sonic does care. Thankfully, he's quickly informed that these trooper badniks are prime badniks, like the one in issue 5. There's no one inside. This allows Sonic to let loose, making short work of his enemies and announcing his return to Robotnik. Going forward, these troopers would become Robotnik's main force, and we'll see these Judge Dredd-looking death machines in the pages of countless issues to come. Their design really setting the tone for Robotnik's militaristic stranglehold over a now oppressed planet. Again, another fantastic issue from the Dream Team with more little details like Sonic appearing on an aiming scope. It doesn't need to be there, but it adds so much and shows Elson's level of care and work ethic. My only minor niggle is that the green tanks at the start do use organic batteries, while the troopers don't, and Sonic's method for defeating them doesn't show the same concern for his friends as we see just 3 pages later. That said, he does distract these enemies with Spider-Man and Nightwing style quips, which suit the character perfectly. My other minor gripe? Panel layouts. come on, I can't let Elson off the hook just because he's my favourite. This bottom panel, all of the characters are heading to the left, the speech balloons are all on the left. All you have to do is flip this one panel horizontally and the problem is solved. They were so close! But when that minor nitpick is all I have to criticise, you know I was in love with the artwork here again. So that's that, right? The status quo's been formed, Robotnik has taken over, Sonic and the Freedom Fighters will operate underground to thwart Robotnik's schemes wherever they can, yeah? Well, no. While issue 10 is the 4th consecutive issue by Kitching, Elson, and Fell, dealing itself all into the new approach by introducing Sonic's disguise as Bob Beakey and liberating what's essentially a slave labor camp, hot damn, this isn't adopted by the other creative teams for a while. In fact, most of issues 11 through 17 go back to the one-shot format, with many of them feeling like they could have taken place before Robotnik's rule. The first time we see any of the Freedom Fighters in their sick trademark leather jackets, god I want one, is issue 18 by, you guessed it, Kitching and Elson, and we don't properly see the Freedom Fighters assembled until the end of issue 22. In fact, issue 21 onwards would introduce Amy Rose in a story that would lead directly into STC's adaptation of Sonic CD. Yeah, it took this fortnightly comic nearly a year to find its identity and hit its stride. While there are some highlights in issues 11 through 20, and I might talk about some of my favourites one day, I think my next video on these comics will jump ahead to Girl Trouble, Pirates of the Mystic Cave, and all 5 parts of the Sonic Terminator. In the meantime, if you're looking for more Sonic comic content, check out Johnny Vector's videos covering the comic-exclusive Friends and Foes of the series, Sonic the Comic the podcast, and, for a more American flavour, the Game Apologist speed reading series. For now, I've been Sam, this has been a very long video, and I'll see you next time.